All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Tiffany Weigand, and today we're going to be talking about identifying your superpowers so you can identify and leverage your strengths and build a strengths-first culture and a strengths-first mindset for you. So as part of the app, I had that question, I had a poll up there that asked of your awareness of Clifton's strengths and your individual strengths as well. So I had 53 respondents. And of them, I had about 38% say they've taken the assessment and they know their strengths. About 8% took the assessment, but they don't remember their strengths. About 10% are like, well, I've heard of it, but never done anything with it. And then 44% are like, what are you talking about? I have no idea. So just out of curiosity, raise your hand if you've taken the assessment and you know your strengths. All right, a couple of you. Raise your hand if you have no idea what I'm talking about, and that's why you're here. Yay! Wonderful. Well, welcome. I appreciate you all being here and warming up from the outside. So my name is Tiffany Weigand, and a little bit about me, just to understand, I am a Milwaukee, Wisconsin native. So thank you. Some of you are happy. Some of you might be saying, I can't talk to you anymore. Well, I want you to know a little bit about me, too, and my presentation style. I like to be very informal. So I encourage participation. I'm okay with heckling as well. I'm a little disappointed that nobody sat in the front row yet, but the latecomers will be sitting there. So, maybe I'll encourage you to move up at some point. So I'm a lifelong Lutheran. And a little bit about me is I started my career in marketing. I worked in marketing for about 13 years. And even going back further, thinking about my childhood. I don't know about you, but I grew up often feeling jealous and envious of other people. Why can't I be like other people? And I unfortunately often had people in my life say the same thing. Why can't you be nice like her? Why can't you do this? All these things, right? So I had all these negative feelings. And whether you had a lot of that in your life or just a little, you probably know how that felt at one point or another, where you were comparing yourself to others. And I love this saying, comparison is the thief of joy, right? So let's appreciate who we are rather than who we should be, because I want to stop those feelings of feeling like I'm never good enough. And I want you to feel that way as well. And I don't want you to be envious of each other. I want you to say, this is how God created me to be, and I'm so thankful for that. And you're right, I'm not good at everything, but that's where you come in, right? So, and I also believe laughter is the best medicine. So again, rather than me preach to you for 90 minutes, I want this to be interactive. Whatever comes to mind, feel free to jump in, ask questions, especially if you need help clarifying. So as I said, I started out in marketing. Well, I was so excited because I think it's maybe 6 years ago now, I got hired to work with one of the churches I grew up in. I was so excited, right? I got to do the marketing and the branding for this church. I feel like I can finally give back after everything they did to me when I was younger. And then I found out that the first step of my process was to interview people, right? Interview the leaders. Why did you bring me in? How can I help you? What do you want to do? So I reached out to the leaders, right? The pastors, the principals, other individuals that were leading this committee. Half of them didn't even want to talk to me, right? And I wasn't taking it personal at that point. I was wondering, well, this is a huge red flag. What's going on? And eventually, I started having some people reach out to me and giving me the backstory, and I still had some of the pastors that never even talked to me. And what I was learning is this half of the room was so excited. That's why I was there. You brought me in. And the rest of you were like, we're just going to say yes because we're sick of arguing with the other half, right? But we're not going to really push this forward. So the organization was dividing, and somebody even said, some people in this organization are willing to just let the organization die rather than come together and be aligned in whatever that mission was. So you may be experiencing some of that yourself, to say some of you think the church should go this direction and some are saying let's go in the other direction. Well, that was the catalyst for me to really shift to say I loved marketing, but I wasn't always getting to the root issue. And I knew no matter how good of a marketing plan I put together for this organization, it wasn't going to help the real issue. And I will tell you, I put together that plan, and they haven't done a single thing with it, right? So I feel personally responsible, like, maybe I didn't do a good plan, but I also know that it was also on them to actually implement and say, well, let's make sure this is something we can do. So about that time, I was connected with other individuals who teach what I teach today, and I reached out to them, and I said, first of all, you need to go to that church. You need to help them, right? I want them to succeed. And second of all, are you hiring? And that's how I got into what I'm doing today. Because within the organization, right, there was lack of accountability, there was divide, I don't trust you, I don't really feel like we can have true conflict, right? I'm just going to maybe shut down. You ever have those meetings after the meetings, right? You're all talking, you all go in your groups of 2 or 3 and talk about each other, right? That's not necessarily helping anything. And in fact, there are certain strengths that can rub each other the wrong way. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, to say if we can understand our strengths, I cannot promise you that I will eliminate your frustration, but I can help to reduce it. So that is the goal as we talk through today. So I want you to think about taking the word weakness out of your vocabulary and replacing it with partner up opportunities. You cannot be good at everything, and that's okay. That's where the people in your life, God brings those individuals into your life to say, how can we work together? Now be honest, you all chose to come here, but are any of you still thinking, why should I care about this? Why is this going to help me or my ministry? No brave souls? You all love it. All right, good. So the reason I say that is usually when I'm working within an organization, there's a couple people in here who are asking why, right? Why is this important? It's the idea of trust, but verify. I know that you feel like this is a good idea, but what are the numbers telling me? So what we see here so Gallup conducted 2 studies, and that's what I have up here for you. So the turquoise, or the lighter blue color, depending on what it looks like to you, says over the last 10 years, 3 out of 10 employees are engaged in what they do. It has nothing to do with marriage, okay? This is saying, I love my job. I'm the brand ambassador. I'm going above and beyond. I'm going to put in the 10, 12, 15-hour day because I absolutely love this ministry, right? I want to let people know that they should come work here. They should send their children here. They should join this ministry. 3 out of 10. Does that feel high or low to you? Low. Next question. Does it surprise you? We've worked with enough organizations, right? Within organizations to say, it's sad, but I'm not surprised. So 3 out of 10. And then 53% are not engaged. These are the people who are, hey, you know what? I need money. I need a job. I have to work somewhere. Will anybody hire me? They're not necessarily hurting things, but they're not putting in all the extra time, and they don't necessarily have the passion for what you're doing. And then 17% are actively disengaged. These are the saboteurs. These are the people that are saying, I am so unhappy, right? I go to you and I complain about something, I didn't get enough money, and you're going to be nice for a little bit, and then you're going to be like, I got stuff to do. Then I'm going to go to you, same thing, right? You talk to me. And so not only am I not happy, I'm creating this toxicity where now you might have actually been fine, but now you're like, these seeds are planted in your head to say, oh, do I want to be a part of this organization? I'm upset about this too. So we really, really want to address the actively disengaged. And really we want to say, how can we shift everything down? So then the second study that Gallup did was the darker blue color here that says when U.S. workers and leaders work from their strengths. So again, this isn't you just working in a vacuum. It does start with you, but it's the entire organization. It's you as a leader, seeing and recognizing strengths in other people to say, okay, well, if I'm able to work for my strengths and my manager or my leader sees that in me as well, engagement jumps up to 73%. Right? Most people think that people quit jobs because of money, right? I want to go somewhere else for more money. They don't, right? Often they quit because of the manager or your leader, right? Maybe you feel like you're not respected or appreciated, and you're like, I'm putting in all these hours and it's still not good enough. Like, I don't understand, right? So it's just easy to say it's because of the money. So again, if you're working from your strengths, it jumps to 73%. How much more could your ministry accomplish if everybody was engaged in what they were doing, right? Running like a well-oiled machine. So that's the ultimate goal, right? And then not engaged goes to 26, and actively disengaged goes down to 1%. It's statistically insignificant. It can never get to 0. So this is the why. So again, if these numbers are helpful, feel free to take any pictures of the presentations if that's helpful for you to take that back to anybody else. So as anybody sees this number, raise your hand if you're thinking, well, what is the root issue, right? What is the true challenge here that we're trying to solve? Does your head kind of go there at all? Mine does, right? I'm thinking about problem solving. All right, I will wait and get out of your ways to take pictures. All right. Well, I was wondering why, right? I want to get to the root issue and figure out what's really going on. So as I said, in the United States, 3 out of 10 are just like, I love my job, and 7 out of 10 are saying, I just need a job. Well, it actually goes all the way to education, right? So those of you that work in education, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to create lifelong learners, right? In whatever field that they choose. So this is called the engagement cliff. So it's the same three categories of actively disengaged, not engaged, and engaged. So as you can see, in 5th grade, 74% of people love coming to school, right? I remember recess. I don't know why we got rid of that, right? I still feel like nap time should be brought back, but that's for a separate discussion. But then if we get to high school, look at this, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, about 32 to 34% are actively engaged in what they're doing, right? And then we're looking at 66 or so percent are not engaged or actively disengaged. So think about that. This goes all the way back to high school, where kids are just thinking, you know what, I'm not going to amount to anything. I just need a job, and my parents aren't happy in their job, so I understand that I'm not going to like my job either. I'm not even going to try. So if we can help students understand their strengths as well. So this assessment is great for adults, but I hear so often, I wish I could have done this when I was younger, 10, 20 years ago, right? How can we bring this to our children, to our students? So this assessment, as long as you have a good grasp of the English language, it's suggested 17 and older, but we brought this to high schools to have a high school student say, wow, I'm so used to my teacher telling me everything that's wrong with me, I'm failing. Instead of saying, well, what are your strengths? How can we capitalize and leverage those in whatever career you choose? So this is the ultimate goal, and then Gallup does have an assessment for those of you maybe the younger grades. As long as they can understand the English language, you can sit in there with them. It's not a timed session, and they can take this assessment. So instead of getting your top 5 out of 34 as an adult, the students will get their top 3 themes out of 10. And it's only $10. So just think of how much you spend on your kids. $10 for this assessment to help them identify where their strengths are and how to leverage them going forward. Any questions or comments on any of that? Yes? So for the younger one, for the $10 one, I think it goes to age 6 or 7. But again, you want your children to be able to read it. And then what we encourage is, as a parent or anybody else, if you're doing this with another child, is be in the room as they're taking it, and then just wait for them to ask you questions to say, well, what does this word mean? And instead of answering, right, you want to answer what the word means, not what you think they are. But still allow them to do that. So 6 or 7, I've heard parents do that with their kids. Great question. Other questions on this or anything so far? All right. So with the Clifton Strengths Assessment, there are so many applications, right? And today it's understanding the individual, right? To say, how can I myself understand my strengths to make sure that I'm going down the path that God intended for me, right? How can I use my gifts? So you can do individual coaching. But then there's team building to say, how can I work better with my team? And when I say team, I'm thinking any team, right? It can be your spouse, your kids, your entire family. I know a lot of families that do this as a fun exercise. One family actually do this the mother did it as a Christmas present to all the rest of the family, spouses and everything. So that was their gift to really learn a little bit about each other. And then volunteer and donors, right? So often there's so many things that you want to do. You just don't have enough money and you don't have enough volunteers, right? Well, so instead of just always blanket asking, I need volunteers for this, if you can start to understand your donor, your volunteers, to say, who do I need to tap into for what they really enjoy doing. I mean, there's many times where I've helped my church, but I didn't necessarily want to do that thing, right? It didn't really excite me. But had they asked in a different way, understanding my strengths, I'd probably be volunteering a lot more. And it's so great for my pastors to see this in me, to say, I see the value in you, and I want to leverage that. Because sometimes people are just thinking, I don't have anything to give. I don't know how I can help, so I'm just not going to. So this can also help us with those discussions as well. So we bring a couple biblical readings into this as well to say that just like strengths, there's no strengths that are better or worse. Just like we have one body, we have many parts. Each part of our body, right, serves a purpose. So we don't need 10 hearts, right? We don't need 20 eyes. We don't think that certain body parts are better than others. And you notice that, right? I have a paper cut, right? How stupid is that? But this has been bothering me for the last 2 days. If you think about your body, when you're not at 100%, that can just affect so much else, right? So just understanding that every single body part, every single strength is important, They each have their purpose, and you want to be able to run effectively, right? Because one part of you isn't working well, one strength isn't there. You can sense that in your organization. So it's important, right, that we are all fearfully and wonderfully made. So I keep talking about the word strength here, but I want to take a step back and say we are born with talents. Okay, we are born with these talents. So it's this natural ability. It's this constant pattern of thought, feeling, and behavior, right? How you respond to a particular situation. And what we want to do over the course of our life is to develop it into this strength where it's consistent, near perfect performance. So it's the idea that you're taking this strength and you're positively applying it in your life, right? Personally and professionally. So some people really hone in their talents into strengths at a very young age, and some it takes years to really develop to say this is really a strength and this is a blessing versus maybe this is hindering me a little bit. So the example here is WOO, which stands for winning others over. Does anybody in this room think that they have WOO, where they love to meet people? Yeah, got a couple. Yeah, you're like, I have no problem starting a conversation. So you're excited by this event. You're having a great time. We'll talk later about the opposite of that. We're going to just foreshadow there a little bit. But so those of you with WOO, you love it. Purposely meeting people and networking and connecting, right? And it can be you just love starting a conversation with somebody, and then you learn something about them, and you say, you know what? You need to meet so-and-so. Like, I think the two of you would really click for whatever reason. And that is WOO. And we'll actually talk more about that in a little bit. So again, to say, how are you using this strength? And do you feel like it's a strength or it's something that you have to develop more? Then we also teach that there are a lot of assessments out there. Have you ever taken like Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, DISC, things like that? Yeah. So with those, they're all great. The reason that we focus on Clifton Strengths is for two key reasons. Number one, positive psychology. Hopefully this lifts you up. This helps you see yourself in a positive light. I've taken other assessments, and sometimes I've walked away with like, oh, I don't feel very good about myself. Whereas this has really helped shift to say, okay, I'm not good at everything, but this helps me identify what I'm strong in. And then secondly, it showcases how unique we truly are. If you look at some of the numbers up there, there's a 1 in 33 million chance of you and I having the same top 5 in the same order. People aren't replaceable. Positions are replaceable, but you are not. I've been in a room with just 10 other people when I've taken some of the other assessments, and I've had the same results as other people. And I look at that person, whether I liked them or not, and I thought, I wouldn't have thought that, right? Whereas this really showcases those uniquenesses, and it opens up the door to have positive, objective conversations to say, how does that apply to you? How do you see that in your life? Do you see that, right? Do you really feel like this is you? And let's talk about how you use it. And can I help you use it more? So shout out, what's the first thing you see? Saxophone, person, woman? Yeah. Are we all looking at the same thing? Huh. All right, so we can all be looking at this same exact picture and see something different, right? It's exactly how it is with strengths. We can be looking at the same situation and we all see something different. We can see in a positive or negative light the concerns or the benefits that's going to happen. So we are all unique. We all have different superpowers. And for me, when I say superpowers, it's your strength, right? It's your different perspectives. It's how you're going to respond to a situation. So in your ministry, something new just happened, some change was announced, and some of you were so excited, like, let's get going, I'm excited. And some of you are saying, well, I don't know if that's really going to address the real problem. And others are like, you know, so-and-so is going to be so upset about that. Right? We all respond differently, and it's all important. We need to have everybody's perspective. So again, understanding that you are needed, you have that purpose. So the encouragement always is to share your strength, share your perspective, because you might be the only person in that room, on that team that has that strength, and if you don't bring that up, nobody else is going to think about it. So again, I want to encourage you to really think that through, to say, what is the value that I can bring that nobody else on this team can? And that's why I'm here today. So again, reiteration. Take weakness out of your vocabulary and replace it with partner up opportunities. That's the one thing I really hope you take away from this. Okay, maybe like 10 things, but that's one of the big ones. You'll see that a few times, and that's why. So in addition to talking about yourself, it's about the team, right? So think about a puzzle. Anybody like putting together puzzles, right? Have you ever like bought a puzzle, started to put together, and like it's missing a couple pieces? That is just wrong, right? Same thing with this idea, right? So we are all a piece of the puzzle And we need to realize that I actually don't want you to be well-rounded. I want your team to be well-rounded. So there's certain strengths that you bring, and then you have this sort of edge to yourself where you're like, yeah, I'm just really not good at that. And just say, okay, this is me. This is my little bubble. These are my puzzle pieces that I bring. Who else on the team can really help me complete that puzzle piece, or that puzzle, excuse me. So again, constantly think about that with your team as well, how you all can work really well together. And we do teach an 80-20 rule in that 80% is how you are born and 20% is what happens over time. So we teach that strengths will rarely change. I was talking to somebody earlier and she said that she took it more than once and she said her strengths changed. Love to talk to you about that if that's ever happened to you. So typically in the past, when people would take the assessment, they'd only get their top 5. And we teach that your top 8 are really what's at play. So if you only have your top 5 from 2, the order might have shifted a little bit. But what we say is your number 1 is never going to become 34, and 34 is never going to become 1, right? Those of you with woo, you're not one day going to wake up and say, I can't stand people, I'm not going to talk to anybody, right? And those of you who are like, I can't stand networking events, aren't all of a sudden going to say, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, I'm going to do it all the time, right? So there's going to be like a little bit of shift, right, that 20%, but people overall will rarely change their strengths. Now, even though today is all about strengths, I want you to understand that strengths are just one part of who we really are, right? There's so many other aspects. So a lot of other great presentations here if you've attended some of them and taken away other things. But yeah, we want to make sure that we're addressing fatal flaws with individuals, but understanding strengths is really at the top of the pyramid. If we start at the bottom, right, we need to be a good foundation of high quality values, right? We're looking out for the good of everybody. It's not just about me. Virtues, right? Fruits of the Spirit, right? And then being healthy spiritually, emotionally, and physically, right? It's about resiliency. We can have bad days, we can go through bad things, but can we be resilient to say, how is our spiritual life? We have to understand we're okay having emotions, but not letting them control us. And then physically, are we getting enough sleep, nutrition, and exercise, right? So I bring this up for 2 reasons. Again, first of all, looking at ourselves to say, how am I doing? What areas do I need to improve on? And this is being recorded, so I won't get too specific, but I know there's things that I need to work on, right? Likely, same for you as well. And I say that because if I'm having a bad day, let's say I just got in a fight with my husband right before this presentation, I might be not on my game. And you might come up to talk to me, and I might be short with you because I'm thinking of that argument, and I'm just thinking, I just need to go. I need to be done for the day, right? So you might get a bad impression of me. But understanding that we don't know what everybody's going through, so for me, myself, I have to say, okay, I have to make sure that I'm in a healthy place. And then if I'm working with you and you snap at me, and all of a sudden you just missed a deadline, I'm like, what is going on? You know, you're normally on top of things. Instead of me snapping or yelling at you, I can say, are you okay? You know, I want you to know that I'm there for you. Whether you want to tell me what's going on or not, just knowing that I care can be very powerful to say, you know what, maybe you need a day off, or maybe you need to go take a quick walk, you know, to maybe clear your head. Because what happens, so sometimes people say to me, Tiffany, you're telling me that this person has this specific strength. I'm not seeing it in them. Yeah, it happens quite a bit. Especially if we're working in a team. So then we'll go back to say, well, there's something going on in their life, right? And almost always I hear a lot of what's going on in the individual's life. And I'm like, okay, I see that, right? So how can we help them in these areas? Because once they're comfortable here, once they're in a healthy point here, you're going to see their strengths. So again, it all interconnects. And we also teach the idea of servant leadership, or SFOs. So it's the idea that strengths are only strengths when they're used for other people, right? We don't want to use our strengths selfishly. It's not about me, right? It's about what can we do for our ministry or our organization. So instead of trying to create a lot of mini-me's, right, to say, I just need you to do it my way, it's, no, this is the way that I would do it. Use it if it's helpful for you. But if it's not helpful for you, that's okay. What is the way that you would do it based on your strengths? You ever find yourself doing that with kids? Like, it would just be so much easier if you did it my way. It's like, oh, it's easy for me to do it my way, but maybe not for you. So again, we'll based on our strengths, share how we think it would be best applied. And it's up to you as an individual to say this works for me or it doesn't. Any questions on anything so far? Comments? All right. Everybody should have a pen and the paper I handed out. So I have an activity for you. You're going to love it. So I want you to sign don't do it yet, Achievers in the room. I'll let you know when. So I'll explain it first. So I want you to sign your name on that sheet of paper anywhere you want as quickly and neatly as possible, and I'm going to time you. Before I tell you to go, does that make sense? Sign your name as quickly and neatly as possible. All right, on your mark, get set, go. Pretty easy, right? Is it pretty? Frame it. Wondering why I asked you to do that? Okay. Anybody here have competition? Always want to be better? First. He was first. Second, third, fourth. Okay. All right. So I want you to try to be faster and neater. When I say go, again, don't do it yet. I know. Faster and neater. I know. High expectations. And here's the trick. Put the pen in your other hand. Nobody ever said I was nice. All right, on your mark, get set, go. Did you try?
He just didn't, he gave up. Hey, just like I did in 3rd grade.
Exactly. You're seeing it. All right. So the first time I just chose one of you. 5 seconds. Second time, 20 seconds. Okay? So 4 times longer to write it with your non-dominant hand. And then Richard here, I appreciate you saying it looks like you wrote it in 3rd grade, right? We're going back to when we first learned to write. And you, I don't see your name. Steven didn't even care. He just started and he's like, I'm done. And he's okay with that, right? Every once in a while we will get one of those. All right. So it was hard. Some of you were like, I don't even want to do that. What if I encouraged you to write with your non-dominant hand for the rest of the day? First of all, would any of you do it? 1, you have responsibility, don't you? You're like, most wouldn't, or they'd give it a shot and say, wow, that's exhausting. Because again, when you're signing with your normal hand, right, it's easy. You can have a conversation with somebody while doing it. If you have to do it with your non-dominant hand, you're exerting a lot more time and energy, and you just have to focus on that one thing. You can't think about other things. So let's think about that in terms of strengths, right? When we're operating from our strengths, it's what we do best. We do it without thinking. It takes a lot less energy to do it, right? We can do it more quickly, and we're engaged. And guess what? We probably enjoy it. So if you actually did that the rest of today, at a certain point, you'd probably reach out to me and be like, that was just so bad. Like, it just ruined the rest of my day, or it was so frustrating. I didn't feel like I got anything else done, right? You didn't necessarily enjoy it. You might give it your best shot, but now let's tie this into strengths. All right. We teach the idea of energy management instead of time management. So when it comes to energy management with your strengths, you're always operating from what you do, what brings you energy, what recharges you. Whereas if you're working outside of your strengths, that's what's draining you. Again, I'm going to tell you right now, whatever strength you have at number 34, you can do it, right? I'm not going to be here to tell you you can't do it. I'm just telling you you're not going to enjoy it, right? You can be so much more productive with your top strengths than those other strengths. It's still about developing, but you can be a lot more productive and you're going to enjoy developing your strengths versus those weaknesses or partner up opportunities. Anybody here like Excel spreadsheets? Yeah, you're my people. I love it. All right. The rest of you are like, that's awful, right? No, thank you. Or maybe in the middle. So I love Excel spreadsheets. So when it comes to Excel spreadsheets with my organization, I have a full tank of gas, right? It takes me 10 to 20% energy or effort. My husband's really good with macros, so it's like between him and I, it's like we can do a lot and accomplish a lot. So we're energized, and we appreciate when you reach out to us and ask us for help. Even when we're busy, we're like, sweet, I love it. I love Matt. We'll help you out. I'm going to save you days of time if I can do this macro for you, right? And meanwhile, you're probably worried about asking us for help. You're like, they're so busy. I don't want to bother them, right? But you may be on the other side when it comes to Excel spreadsheets. It might take you 80 to 90% energy or effort to get 10 to 20% of the results done, right? You're going to do it because it's part of your job. Somebody said you had to do it, but it is so draining. You might actually exert so much energy saying, I don't want to do it and pushing it off, that by the time you finally do it, you're like, wow, I wasted so many hours. And I didn't really get very far. So I bring this up to say, I don't think that job descriptions should be static. I am also not saying that stop doing everything you don't like to do. Okay? This is being recorded. I will tell your boss I didn't say that. But I am saying long term, can you adjust your job descriptions? Or as a volunteer, you might love most of what you're volunteering for and some things are really draining. Well, how about you say, you know what, I'm going to keep doing everything that I love, but we need to find somebody else that can fill this gap because this is really draining. And rather than getting burned out, I want to just do the things that really bring me joy and that are easy for me. Does that make sense? All right. Yes, sir.
I had a friend of mine's daughter works for a very, very big floral shop in Massachusetts. She is so talented and has so many things. They said, what's your real passion? Because we want to make you a vice president. Create your own job description.
Yeah.
That's rare in the business world. But so she said, everything I put down on my job description I'd love to do. I've never been so productive in my life. I'm working from all my strengths.
That's awesome. Wouldn't we all love that, right? I would love that, and I'll be honest, I don't love everything that I do. There's some things that I really don't enjoy doing. So again, thinking about yourself to say, again, maybe it's not going to be a solution tomorrow, but looking at your team to say, how can we rearrange some of those things? So we have another resource, email me if you'd like it. It's basically saying, list all the jobs that you do. And then you're going to look at it and say, from terms of experience as well as strengths, and you put them into 4 quadrants, and there's going to be this one quadrant that you're like, these things don't fit my strengths, and they don't fit my experience. I've never done them. Well, why are you wasting your time doing that? Unless you feel like either you want the experience or you want to learn how to use your strengths. So then what you do is you have everybody within the organization say, what's in that one quadrant where it doesn't fit my strengths or my experience? Let's look at that entire list and then find somebody else on the team that would enjoy doing it. Because then, you'd be surprised. There are people on your team that probably love some of the things that just drive you crazy. Okay? So again, planting those seeds of things to think about, of ways to apply this. Some people are also afraid of taking this assessment because they feel like, well, what if I get the wrong results? Okay? There are no strengths, like I said before, are better or worse, right? They're all equal. They're all beneficial. But if we can understand that strengths determine how we do things rather than what we do, again, we're not saying that you have to have a certain role based on your strengths. But I often ask people when I'm working with them is to say, okay, if you identify these as your strengths, do you feel like you're using them in your job or in your volunteering? And sometimes they'll be like, well, are you going to tell my boss my answer? I'm like, no, this is between you and me. And they'll say, I don't really feel like I am. Okay, well, what do you want to do about it? How can I help you as a coach? Again, I don't want to coach you out of the job, but I want you to just reflect to say, can I adjust my job to do something I really enjoy more? Or maybe this isn't the right job for me for whatever reason, right? So again, I always want to work with people on an individual basis to say, where can you best serve on your current team or in the future as well? All right, so you've got a handout in front of you, and again, I'll encourage you to keep taking notes. I'm going to be talking about these 8 categories, but really I want you to think long term, right? So like I said, I want you to focus on your superpowers, and again, I associate superpowers with strengths. So a couple things. I hope that as we go through today and you think about this going forward, your flight home or your drive home, I want you to reflect on yourself to say, when am I at my best? Well, what things do I do that give me a lot of energy? That I'm like, this was so great. I put in a long day, and I loved it. And what do people often come to you for? You might start to see a pattern that people always come to you for something, and you might be like, why do they always come to me? Well, because you have the answer, and it's really easy for you, right? Look at that as a positive thing. Acceptance. Accept who you are, and accept who God created you to be, rather than who you think you should be or who somebody else thinks you should be. So with that, once you accept it, you can say, how can I leverage these in throughout my life? And then appreciation. Appreciate the need to partner up with other people, right? We were not created to be alone. So by partnering up with others, we have that maximum energy and output. And then taking all this to discover how you can use these strengths and leverage them in your ministry, in your teams, with your family, and with your friends, so that everybody can benefit from them. So again, my encouragement, take the assessment if you've never done it. It's an investment of $25 for your top 5, $65 for the full 34, and that's something that's through Gallup. I can always give you information on how to do that. So with Gallup's assessment, there are 34 strengths. So each of us has all 34 strengths, just in diminishing returns. So number 1 is who we really are, and number 34 is like, please don't ever make me do that if I don't have to, right? So this is different from Gallup. So we use Gallup's assessment, but this is taught differently. So we've got these 8 categories here. So this is what you have in front of you. I just wanted you to have this so you could reference it as we talk further, and you can kind of see which strengths are in which category. I often hear people say, oh, there's just a lot of information. I just can't memorize it all. I don't want you to, right? Again, it's just giving you this information and taking what's helpful for you. So the first category is traction. So individuals who have traction strengths love to get things started. Think about your ministry, right? You've got your council team or maybe a volunteer group, and you're talking about all these ideas, and you meet every month, and you talk about it, and then you come back the next month, and you talk about the same stuff. And then the next month, you talk about the same stuff again, and you're like, why aren't we doing anything, right? Raise your hand if that might frustrate you because you're like, we need to get started. What is that first step? Yeah, a couple of you raising your hand. Oh, so you're the ones in that meeting saying, can we actually take the first step, right? Let's stop talking and actually do something because we haven't gotten any farther since the last month, the time that we met. So traction can be great for organizations to start new initiatives, right? When you're thinking about, do we want a new school? Do we need to expand? Do we need a new ministry? Whatever it might be. So traction can be great, but doesn't always finish things. So we want to partner up with the driving strengths. The driving strengths love to check things off of their to-do list. They're kind of thinking, hopefully Tiffany finishes early so I can return a couple emails before my next thing, right? It's about getting things done. Does that sound like anybody? Raise your hand. Yeah. Yeah, got to get those things done. So some people say to me, well, Tiffany, traction and driving, what more do you need? People who start things, people who finish things. Well, it's very task-oriented. And we want those people to partner up with the seeing strengths. The seeing strengths say things like, is this even part of our mission, right? Is this a part of our mission, our vision, our values? Should we be doing this now, later? Not at all. Like this isn't even part of anything we've ever talked about before. So for example, some strengths, like analytical, sees the little details. What do I want to do today, tomorrow, and the next day, right? So I have analytical. I'm always asking why. Why are we doing this? Why is this important? What are the numbers telling me, right? So in the very beginning when I showed you the statistics, I would be the one in the audience saying, why are we doing this? Why is this important to me? And then strategic says, high level, I can see where we want to be 1, 2, or 3 years from now. So maybe people with strategic are thinking out further to say, what is our strategic plan? What do we want our enrollment or our membership to be? Or attendance, whatever it might be about a year from now. What are those high-level goals? And then futuristic, oh, you're the dreamers, right? Coming up with all these really cool ideas that scare people. Because they're like, can we just focus on today? I don't know if we're going to shut our doors in the next month. I can't even sit here and think about 5, 10, or 15 years from now. Right? So understanding, we need all of these, right? We need the dreamers, because I'll tell you, if you don't have the dreamers, you never know where you could possibly go. So this is where I tell my sweet story. So my husband has futuristic. I have analytical, right? So he's always thinking about that next idea 10 years from now. And I'm like, can we just get through this week? The house that we live in right now, when we bought it, it was a fixer-upper. We had to do a few things before we moved into it. So we were probably renovating it for maybe 2 or 3 months at the time. Before we even moved in, slept there the first night, my husband goes, you know, in our next home we should, and I'm like, stop, nope. Like, we have to live in our current home at least one night before you can dream about that next home, right? But again, we've been married long enough where I can give him a hard time, but now I appreciate it. So early on in our marriage, he had that futuristic, and I kind of tuned him out, right? I'm like, stop it. Like, I need to figure out what's going on now. Then finally, I got to a point where I trusted him, and I trusted his futuristic vision to say, okay, yeah, you know what? We created the life today because you had that vision. I found a letter he wrote me 20 years ago that literally describes our life now. It's very crazy, but it's true. So I'm just like, you know, I never would have envisioned this life. We would still be living in our very first condo ever, right? I would have been very comfortable there, but he saw where we could progress. So when people on your team have different strengths than you, right? Maybe you're an analytical or a futuristic, right? There's a lot of other strengths that can be complete opposites like that. But if you're an analytical and you have somebody on your team that's constantly dreaming, and you're like, again, we need to figure out budgets now. Understand where they're coming from. They're not trying to do it to annoy you, usually, right? Sometimes we like to poke buttons, right? We all do that. But it's to say they're not doing it to be annoying. They're doing it just because that's how they think. That's how they operate, right? So again, appreciating a little bit of that to say, okay, well, I appreciate the insight. That gives me some things to think about, and now we can figure out how to maybe adjust going forward. So we have traction that starts, driving that finishes, seeing that says, are we doing the right things at the right time? But we want to make sure that we partner up with interpersonal, right? Interpersonal is saying, there's a lot of things we want to do. There's all these great missions, but it's the people, that's you, that are making sure that this mission actually happens, right? So, for example, developer. Developers are known as the natural encourager. They see the potential in everyone. They might be drawn to early education, right? To teach little kids how to tie their shoe, how to write, all that fun stuff, right? So they're going to be very patient and encouraging. But the opposite of developer is maximizer. Maximizers are saying, you know what? I can't really work with the little kids. I have to work with the people who are going really, really well and take them to the next level, to the pinnacle. Maybe they're in high school or college and doing the AP classes. They want to go fast. They're going to show you once, twice, maybe 3 times, and then you should have it. If you haven't figured it out by then, I don't have time for you anymore, right? They're the ones that are saying, wow, you're being really patient with that kid learning to tie their shoes. At 4 years old, I was making my shoes. Like, come on, what's going on? So if you look at these from opposites, right, developers is saying that the maximizer is too harsh, right? You're so impatient. The maximizer is saying you're wasting your time on people. Work on other people where you can have more of a return on your investment of time. But knowing you need both, right? Even as it describes some of those, you might be thinking, oh, I would actually prefer to work with the developer, or I prefer to work with the maximizer. So understand everybody is different, and understand they each have value at different times. Any questions on those first 4 categories? Yes.
Just so I understand, each individual bullet is part of the interpersonal.
Yes.
Because they're up to the same goal.
Correct. Yeah. So in each category, some strengths can be very different. Yes. And so it's the idea. Have you ever said?
I'm thinking on an Excel spreadsheet as I'm talking.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4 to the right. So exactly, that's what I'm like. Oh, they're all in the same column.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So have you ever found yourself saying things like, I'm a people person? What does that even mean, right? So we could be a people person and really want to just help everybody with developer. We can be a people person and say, I want to just help those high-level people go to the next level. We could be those woos that want to talk to anybody and everybody. And then I haven't touched on it, but the relator, we'll talk about it a little bit later too. Relators are saying, it's about quality versus quantity. I just need a couple close friends. Once I get to the limit of 5, then I'm done, right? I'm maxed out. So again, we all have interpersonal strengths, and they all operate a little bit differently, yes, even though they're in the same category. Great question. Was there another question in the back?
I do have one. I didn't have my hand up.
Oh.
Do you find that people have like multiple in the same category? Like looking at this one, I think maybe all 5 of mine might be in here.
Awesome.
But just like looking at the different ones, is that common to see like a lot of strengths in the same?
I see it all over the place. I will work with people. So we'll work with people with top 5 or top 8, so it does vary depending on that. So if I have a top 5, I've had it where somebody has strengths in 2 categories, all the way up to I think 6 or 7, which you can, because I did not mention, but on your sheet, some strengths, the way we teach it, are in multiple categories. So when you see the asterisk after them, that means they're in multiple categories. Yeah. And then we've also seen it where somebody has strengths, only one in every category. So it's kind of the bell curve, a little bit of everything. Yes, sir.
I do a lot of work in barbershop, quartet singing, coaching, directing, things like that. I had a friend of mine, he's since passed away. He would come up with 10 of the craziest ideas imaginable. He was a dreamer and a thinker, and none of them would work, except that one, and he had to plow through all of it. But I had to, in order to work with him and help him get what he wanted to get done as the director, I had to develop my skill level and all that. So depending on what he was trying to get accomplished, I had to take the role to make sure it got done because he didn't know how to do that.
Yep. So since you brought that up, I'll tell you what strength that is. That is the strength of ideation. It's kind of, for some people might call it the squirrel, shiny object syndrome, right? Like a lot of really cool ideas. So what you just described, that was him. He's all these amazing ideas. Yeah, but so again, you said that one worked. Like you knew that one worked, right? But we might look at that and get frustrated, depending on some of our other strengths, to say, wow, you're just overwhelming me with so many ideas. Am I supposed to do all of them? Or are we narrowing it down to figure out what that is, right? So understand that ideation could potentially butt heads with others or rub each other the wrong way, depending on how you're perceiving that. So that person needs to say, you know what, I've got all these ideas. We don't have to do all of them. I'm just sharing a bunch of stuff. We're brainstorming. We're seeing what sticks. Some people have even said with ideation, it's the first time I say it, it's just an idea in my head, and I feel like I have to share it with somebody. And they might actually verbalize it and say, well, that was a bad idea. Pretend I didn't say that, right? And the second time, they're like, well, I've kind of narrowed it down from the 100 to the 50. And then by the third time, they're like, this is really good. We need to do it. So then to what Richard was saying, then he knows this is a really great idea, but he may not actually have those traction and driving strengths, right? It's just like, I've got all these ideas. Somebody else take it and run with it because I don't know what those steps are. So it's a perfect example of partnering up if we can understand the benefit of each instead of being frustrated, right? So people with traction and driving could be really frustrated with ideation and say, oh, all he does is have all his ideas, but he's actually not doing anything. Well, if you look at it that way, you might feel that way, but let's look at it a different way to say, if he didn't have that idea and didn't share that with you, what would you even be starting? What would you be finishing, right? Great. Any other questions or comments before we continue? All right. So the next category we have is lifestyle. So lifestyle strengths are how we wish to live or structure our life. So for example, those of you who have the strength of discipline. Discipline loves order, structure, and routine. Okay, you live by the clock to say, all right, what do I have to do? And the fact that the clock is not working in this room kind of bothers me, so I'm going to have to check on time in a little bit. But I love that structure. But I realize that's how I operate best. I operate best when my day is planned out. Some of you in the room are like, ooh, that sounds awful. I don't want to deal with that. Because you might have adaptability, right? So adaptability says, I just need some flex time. Tell me what I have to have done by next Friday, and I'll get it done maybe today, maybe Wednesday, maybe 5 minutes before it's due, right? I'm going to flex, I'm going to adapt depending on what those needs are at that particular time. So adaptability operates best when you can be flexible. Discipline operates best when it has that routine. So again, they're in the same category, but they can be opposites, right? So understanding, and my colleague has discipline like I do, and we can butt heads because our discipline is different, right? So at certain times we have to say, all right, which discipline's going to win out here? Then the next category we have is wildcard strengths. So the way we teach wildcard strengths is wildcards, they don't necessarily have a downside. It's more neutral to positive, and they're the ultimate partner-up strength. So they enhance all the other strengths. So for those of you who might have learner in this room, you love the process of learning and mastering new things. You might have a couple degrees. You just love going back to school and learning. Might be what drew you into education if you're a teacher, right? So with learner, we teach that you're actually a risk taker. So you enjoy learning new things. You're okay with that process of learning that you might fail or fail forward or learn from it. So again, learner is great within a team because learners, you can mimic other strengths. So you had told me that you knew you took it twice and each time you had learner. So we teach that with learner, throughout your life, you learn other things. So let's say you didn't have any traction strengths, but in your organization, you needed to start a new initiative and you just needed to lead it. So you learned how to have traction. So when people have learner, you can learn other strengths. Now, it will never be as efficient or effective as anybody else who has that strength, but it's going to be really great at filling in those gaps within the team. So sometimes I have the learners in the group that are like, Tiffany, I think I have more than 5 strengths in my top 5. So we have some fun discussions about, no, that's not it. That's your learner learning how to learn that particular task. Does that sound like any of you as I'm describing that? All right, perfect. The next one is communication. People of communication love either public speaking, communicating verbally, or writing. Maybe they enjoy marketing, communications, things like that. So the idea of communications with partnering up is to say, are you communicating the right message at the right time to the right audience, right? So that's how it enhances all of the other strengths. Does anybody enjoy public speaking? All right, we'll switch. You guys can take the rest of this. No. All right, then we have problem identification. So individuals who have problem identification are the ones that say, let's get to the root issue. You know, we keep dealing with the same issue month after month. Why is this happening, and how do we stop it from happening, right? So let's say there's a real fire. Obviously, you're going to put out the fire, but if you keep getting a fire, you're going to eventually say, well, what's causing the fire, right? Maybe it's that gas leak. So let's fix the leak so we don't have to keep dealing with that. So many times in an organization, I hear people say, we are so busy, we just don't have time to do this or anything else. We just don't have enough time in the day. That's where problem identification can come in to say, let's really be strategic about this, get to the root issue of what's happening so we're not constantly fighting those real or fake fires, so to speak, right? To say, let's figure it out once so it doesn't keep happening. So people who have strategic, I mentioned before, this is also a seeing strength. So strategic sees out 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. But seeing is also very quick. It's seeing around corners and connecting dots to say, what are my options? What's the best thing that we can identify what the root issue really is? Okay. Intellection, similar, but the process is a little bit slower. People who have intellection, they're very reflective in nature. They want to get to the root issue to say, what's happening? So my sister worked with 3 and 4 year olds for most of her life. And with her intellection, even when she'd go home at the end of the day, she's constantly trying to process to figure out what is happening with this one student, right? He acts out, but it's not consistent. It's not every Monday. It's not every week. It's just very random. So her intellection is processing it 24/7 to try to figure out what's really going on. And then once she figures out what it is, now how can we solve it as we go forward, right? Intellection, some of you might know people, or it might be you. In meetings, when people have intellection, they will often have their arms crossed, and they're not even paying attention. So I've learned when I have people like that in my presentations, don't take it personally, Tiffany, you're not doing a bad job. They might just have intellection, and they're processing verbal and everything else that's going on, right? Seeing how other people are reacting, reading the slides, etc. But that's you taking everything in to say, how can I apply this to myself? What's really going on, right? And then lastly, we have problem solving. So the problem solvers in the room say, okay, now that people with problem identification have identified what the real issue is, this is the best way to solve it. So for example, restorative is the fix it and fix it now strength. In fact, why wasn't it fixed already? Why do we keep seeing this and ignoring it? Let's do something about it. If people have restorative and interpersonal, they may be drawn to being a counselor or a teacher or a coach or a mentor. They really want to help people, right? Help them where they're at, get them back to a healthy or healthier state. Arrangers, we teach that arrangers are known as pilers. So if somebody in your life has piles all over their desk, they may have a ranger. Now again, remember with my discipline, order, structure, and routine. 20 years ago, I would have judged you in a bad way, right? We're not perfect. I'd be like, how can you even work in this environment? Like everything is piled all over the place. Now I'm going to say, way to use your arranger strength. So why do you do that? You enjoy variety. You enjoy working on project A for 20 minutes, then B for 20 minutes, then C for 20 minutes, something else comes up and you go back to A. Well, you want everything within arm's reach, right? I'm going to grab this file folder, work on it for a little bit. All right, done with that, work on something else. So you tend to accumulate those piles. And I've talked to arrangers that, again, they're okay with the piles, or maybe on Friday they're cleaning up their desk, or at the end of the day, but when you see the piles, that's that arranger. And it becomes problem solving because you're looking at this to say, I'm working on so many different things. How can I rearrange schedules, or what am I learning about this project that I can apply to something else and teach to other people? I was working with one HR manager who was saying that she always goes to all the managers and asks, like, okay, what's working well? What are the obstacles you're facing right now? And she said she takes that because as she learns something, she's like, actually, I was just talking to the other manager, and I think they're doing something that could help you, right? So that's how that can provide problem solving. So our goal, this is just one example, is for those of you with problem identification, you're the ones that are saying this is the root issue that we need to address to stop it from recurring. And then people with problem identification can partner up with the problem solvers. And the problem solvers can say, this is the best solution based on resources, based on time, right? Do we need a quick fix right now, long-term fix down the road? What is that solution? They'll share that solution with the team, and then they'll partner up with your traction strengths. And the traction strengths say, all right, now I hear you. I'm going to get started on step 1, then step 2, etc. Once they get it started, they can hand it off to somebody who is driving, who can take it to the finish line and get it done. All the time that that's going on, they partner up with individuals who have seeing strengths. The seeing strengths say, again, are we in alignment and are we doing it at the right time and right place? All the while we partner with interpersonal, making sure everybody's moving along in the same direction, right? We're aligned, not too far ahead or behind, not completely going in the opposite direction. All the while we partner with lifestyle strengths to bring positivity, harmony, belief, discipline, adaptability, etc. All the while we bring wild cards that enhance every area of the entire process. So the goal in the end is to have all 8 categories working together, all 34 strengths, if we're blessed enough to have them, working in unity to achieve your mission and your vision in the most efficient way possible. That's a mouthful, right? As I say all that, does that feel doable? Do you feel like you're doing it but just with different language? Does it feel too complex? This is the part where somebody else speaks, please. Yes, sir.
Have you found that in working all this testing, and I don't want to go to the very young, obviously the very, very young might not have a multitude of strengths, but is there a difference? Do you have fewer strengths at age 18 than you do, say, 48?
You don't. So you will have all 34, no matter what age you take it, taking the assessment. But then when an individual, if I'm coaching a high school student, we'll talk through it to say, do you see this strength in you? And maybe they'll say not necessarily, and we'll say, well, we need to talk about that, explore that a little bit more. Or maybe it's more of that talent, that raw talent is there. They just haven't had time to really mature or develop that.
So there isn't, out of 34, you don't wind up with something that you're stronger at than others?
You do.
Are you?
You'll get your 1 through 34 after you take the assessment. So your number 1 is the strongest, and your number 34 is the, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So is there a tendency to have, everybody has all 34, but I find that difficult to swallow, but I'll accept it. You know what you're doing. The second question is, where do you factor in, okay, you have all these strengths, and here's your top, say, 8.
Mm-hmm.
There's a missing ingredient. What's your passion among those?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because you could get stuck with something you're really good at. It's like asking the wife asking the mailman when he comes home, let's go for a walk. He don't want to do that anymore, even though he's good at it. He knows how to good at it. He's really good at it. Or a salesman whose energy is totally depleted.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to talk a lot when he gets home, or she.
Mm-hmm.
Just leave me alone for a while. I need to re-energize.
Yeah.
What is the passion?
Great. So that gets to the idea of experience. So I was mentioning before, we have the quadrant resource where it's saying it's not just your strengths, it's not just your experience, it's a combination of both. So your hope is that you're doing things that you're really good at and you really enjoy doing. So the combination of strengths and experience should lead you to that passion. And I just want to go back to what you said, because other people might be thinking it. I appreciate you saying you're going to accept what I'm saying. But so with Gallup, they do say that you have all 34 strengths, just in diminishing returns. But as we're going through your results with each individual, we're saying, okay, all right, Richard, this is your number 1. Do you see that, yes or no? Let's talk through that in your work or life experience. And with Partner to Learn, we teach your top 8 are really what are at play. The way that Gallup teaches it, they've changed it a little bit over the years, but the most recent way that they do that is they say you take your full 34, right? You've got your list of 1 through 34. And because we are all very unique individuals, right? Each of you are going to make this decision. You looked at number 1 to say, yep, I do that easily every day. Number 2, yep, easily every day. You get to a certain point, could be at 5, 10, 15, and at a certain point you're going to say, well, I can do that, but I don't always do it. Maybe it's dependent on the situation. So you draw a line there. And then you look at your number 34, you're like, hate it, absolutely don't want to do it. 33, hate it, whatever, right? Not really me. So you're going to get to a certain point, maybe it's 31, maybe it's 24. Those are your bottom talents. So they say you have your top talents, your lesser talents, and your bottom talents. So what they say is you're going to get the most out of your life and everything you do going forward by really developing your top talents. With your lesser talents, use them when you have to, but if you have a partner-up opportunity, do that. Especially find a partner-up opportunity for your bottom talents. So that's where it's going to vary, right? For a student or somebody very young might really feel like just the top 3 are them, and they need to really develop a lot more. Whereas as you're older and hopefully more wise, right, you're going to say, okay, maybe that is a little bit different. Does that help?
So, yes.
Okay.
So with age comes wisdom, so to speak.
Apparently, yeah.
Apparently, for some. So as you get older, you learn how to deal with your strengths.
Mm-hmm.
I really think as you get older, if you aren't, especially with church work, if you aren't passionate about what you're doing, I don't care how good you are at it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not passionate about it,
Absolutely.
it's not going to work as well.
Agreed, 100%. Other questions or comments? Yes, sir?
The Clifton Strengths piece, they have 4 domains: executing,
Mm-hmm.
influencing, relationship building, strategic thinking.
Mhm.
How does these 8, or how is this developed? Because they've never seen this 8 developed this way. How did that 4 domains get developed?
Mhm. Yeah, so Gallup is obviously a very large organization. They've had those 4 domains. We have research. We partnered with 2 individuals. It's on the bottom of the handout that you have. So Dr. Mark McClaskey and Jim Lausma developed this research, I think it's been 15 or 20 years ago now. So they've developed these 8 categories, and that's what we teach from. So that's where we start with the 34 strengths, but we found that people get a lot more out of these 8 categories than the 4. And again, if you've had experience with the 4 and feel differently, I encourage you to talk here at different times. But a lot of organizations we work with have worked with other consultants with the 4 domains, and they were very leery about working with us because they're like, we've tried strengths before, it didn't really do anything with us. And then when we talk through this, it helps give them more clarity to say, now I understand why we might be struggling. And I've got a couple case studies that I'll be talking about there to explain more of the 8 categories. But great question. Thank you. Did that help?
Right, well, the follow-up would be, in those domains, which I see how you presented this, would be if you study those domains and you look at those 34 characteristics or all the characteristics, there's a shadow side to it. So as you talk about ideation,
Yeah.
if you're a maximizer, you're just like, get out of my way, I got time that you're killing me.
Right.
And let's roll, but the analytical guy or the deliberative guy is like, wait a minute, time out, we gotta do spreadsheets out and budget this, and is it sustainable, is it attainable, is it this, and yeah.
Yep. Shadow side. Other ways to say it: is it helping or is it hindering you or your team? So there's a time and place for each strength, right? And so, like you said, the maximizer, we got to get going. We just don't have time. Or there might be the deliberative that says we do need more time, and this isn't as urgent as some people think it is. So in each situation, one strength is maybe going to be a little bit more at play than the others. Thank you. Yes.
I'm thinking in terms of school staff and labeling my teachers as these things right now in my head. So once I know what their strengths are, then is it best, next step, to start labeling tasks as those types of things so I can put the right people in the right group?
Yeah, so what I would encourage is to have the conversation with each of them, take the assessment and say, do these strengths feel like you? Every once in a while you might have somebody that says, I don't know if it's me, but it's like, let's have a conversation about it. So that's why we often encourage one-on-ones with people, because you might read the definition and say, well, I don't think I have that based on that word or the one-sentence definition, but if I ask clarifying questions of how you see that in your life. So I would say before we start assigning tasks to different people for specific strengths, confirm with them that they really feel like these are their strengths, or maybe they need to develop them a little bit more, and ask them that. But absolutely, to say, again, so a perfect example within a school setting, right? For those of you who have WOO, all right, you might have the assumption that the principal should be out greeting the families every single day. Well, if that principal doesn't have WOO, maybe it's best for their energy management that they're only doing it once a week, and encouraging those of you with WOO to go out and do that, because you're like, really? I can go out there and high five and do cartwheels? This is going to be great, right? Rather than feeling like, why am I doing the principal's job? So that's exactly how I'd encourage you to do it with your team, to have those conversations.
I take it you're in a school?
I am, yeah, assistant principal of a K-8.
Because what we use is Teach With Your Strengths. That's a book that you have that basically outlines from an educator side. So run that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, sir.
I got a situation, I'm a ministry team leader, and we've got 10 people on the team, and we're going on gather, grow, and go. Gather to worship, grow, and then go. And I'm saying the very first thing we need to do is we want to get more people involved with this. I think it would be a mistake to just try and, because somebody wants to do this type of testing with everybody in the congregation, and I'm saying, whoa, let's take a time out here. Why don't we start with people who are interested in contributing first?
Yeah.
Because then they might be more receptive. If somebody really just has the drive to serve and everything, would this help or hurt the initiative?
I would see it as helping. You're right. So I think of my father-in-law, who just does everything at the church, right? Because there are other people, nobody else is really volunteering. But I know he would really appreciate it if somebody else came on board that could take a few things away from him. So I don't think it would hinder or be a deterrent. It's just going to help them maybe long term. And I agree with what you're saying, right? So it's like, do you have everybody in the congregation take it or not? I think it's great to start with the people who are actively wanting to serve, to say where are their gifts and how are they best going to serve. But for other people who are maybe open to saying, I'll take the assessment, I'm just curious to learn about myself, then when you need to tap into somebody with a certain strength that your current team doesn't have, you can tap into them and talk to them from their strengths to say, would you be open to helping in this capacity because of this strength? Absolutely. All right. Again, take weakness out of your vocabulary and replace it with partner up opportunities. I think I only have this in here one more time. All right. So it's getting near the end, but I don't want you to fall asleep on me. I don't think you are, but I want to, get the blood circulating and everything. So I've got a fun stand-up activity. So if this sounds like you, I want you to stand up. Do you have trouble saying no? Do you make sure that you do what you say you're going to do, especially if you've already promised it? Because you don't want to let anybody down. And if you do let somebody down, you might feel really bad about missing that deadline, and you find yourself apologizing often, and it has nothing to do with being from the Midwest or anything like that. All right, so if any of that sounds like you, stand on up. Wow. Now let's look at everybody sitting down. They're not responsible. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. All right, you have a seat, right? So this may be one of your strengths, right? Responsibility, we teach, is a lifestyle strength. You're highly credible. You're highly trustworthy. You do what you say you're going to do. So as we've been talking about how there's some downsides or shadow sides of strengths, a downside of responsibility is having trouble saying no. So a good partner-up opportunity for almost all of us in this room is going to be if somebody has a strength of strategic. Strategic is really good at prioritizing and helping you say no to things that aren't your job. Why did you say yes to this? Somebody's trying to pawn something off on you, right? Or why are you doing this now that's not even due for another month, right? So responsibility can sound like traction in driving. Traction starts anything, driving finishes anything. Responsibility will typically only start and finish it if you say you're going to do it or if your leader tells you to do it. But you're not just out doing things because you feel like you have to move. Does that make sense? All right. Now I want you to stand up if you usually get energized and excited to talk to new people and make new friends. Like you're at this BPM event, right? And you enjoy meeting people. We already talked about this one, but please stand up. Are you energized over the last 2 days? Yes? Big smile in the back. I love it. All right. So you likely have woo, right? Winning others over. So as I mentioned before, when it comes to strengths don't determine what career you choose. It's just how you use them, right? So with woo, people may in the business world be drawn to sales or fundraising, fund developing, right? Meeting all sorts of people. And again, with what you do being at this event to say, who can I meet here that can help my ministry, or how can I help them, or how can I help connect them? Right? So that's where it's really powerful. But remember, I've touched on this a little bit before. Some strengths can butt heads with each other if we don't understand each other. So woos can butt heads with this strength. Maybe this is you. You prefer to have a few close friends and hang out with just them instead of making new friends. So if you're at an event like BPM, you're hoping, who do I already know that I can talk to more? You're not necessarily out to make new connections. And in your personal life, again, you might only have 5 or fewer close friends. Everybody else is maybe at arm's length. You work with them, but they're not necessarily close. And you don't maybe enjoy these types of events. You'll come here, but you're exhausted at the end of the day. So if that at all sounds like you, please stand up. Oh, good, I'm not alone. All right. So that is relator. You guys can have a seat. So, all right, so let's talk about how this plays out, right? The woos are like, yay, I love this. Everything is so great. I'm going to talk to everybody. Strangers are just friends I haven't met yet. This is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then the relators are like, okay, I just want to talk to 1 or 2 people and stay with them the rest of the day. If any of you came here for the first time and you met somebody right first day in the morning, you might have tried to stay with them the rest of the day, and then you readjusted your schedule. I've never done that. Relators might not have even wanted to come here because you're like, there's going to be so many people here. I don't know if I can do it, right? So we can butt heads, right? So the woos are going to look at the relators and say, why are you even here if you're not talking to people, right? This is about networking. And the relators are looking at the woos to say, how can you call all of them friends? Do you even know their last name? The answers. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So again, I've had some people, again, these are opposites. I've probably had maybe 20 people that have had both of these in their top 8. Some things I've heard is as a kid, they were more a woo, and as they've developed in time, they've become more of a relator. But just seeing how that has shifted a little bit in their life. Absolutely. And there are other strengths that I'm not even talking about today that may have some small similar characteristics, and you might have that instead of this one. But that is the example of relator. But understanding we need both, right? Woos can go out and meet and talk to all these people, and then you're going to say, oh, Tiffany, you should meet so-and-so. And I'm like, oh, thank you for introducing me to one person. I didn't have to talk to all 40 of you, to meet that one person. And no offense to anybody, right? We don't take offense to that as relators. We just know that that's how we operate. That's what gives us energy. So woos are energized by meeting people. Relators are energized by meeting just a few people or having deep, meaningful conversations with people we already know. And again, there's a benefit to both.
Does this mean you don't want to talk to all of us?
I know. I always get myself in trouble when I'm so vulnerable, right? It's my number 2. It's like, right? And that's the thing. So I don't have the strength of communication, but I get up here and I speak to all of you, right? So I can do this, but I put a lot of work into it. Whereas if anybody here has communication, you're like, just give me a microphone and I'll just get going. No problem. So yes, I can do it, but I know that I'm going to be more exhausted at the end of the day. But yes, I would be happy to talk to you at the end. Thank you. And I appreciate that. Oh, yes. Yeah. Who said it depends?
Depends. What else do you have in there? For myself, I can speak on that because I'm related, but I also have learner. And learner's the aspect that I've got to learn new things, which means sometimes I've got to talk to new people. And that's my value there of targeting necessarily who I'm going to talk to, not just everybody I'm going to talk to. So I don't walk through Walmart and everybody in every aisle is saying, hi, how are you? My name is, and hi, how are you? No, there's specific people I'm going to target because I know I can gain something to better myself as a learner in that aspect. And if it forces me to go deeper with that relationship, I'll give them a call on the phone or send them an email or whatever to then how do I work with them and how do they work with me and how do we elevate each other as a learner in that later.
Did you ask for that feedback or was it just freely given?
Freely given.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
I appreciate your answer, and that's exactly it. So this presentation is not actually long enough for me to get into something else, but I'll point on it. Each strength I'm talking about right now, it's one at a time. When you have other strengths, we call them combination factors, so they result in different results. So I love what you said, where that's your learner saying, okay, I'm going to learn how to have conversations with people. For me, it's my focus to say, what is my goal, right? I want to make sure I'm doing this, or my responsibility. So other strengths are at play. So, I would say, let's tap into why did they say that? What is not getting accomplished because you're not doing that? Can you use some of your other strengths? Or do you actually have to do that based on your roles and responsibilities? So I think it would warrant more discussion. And happy to discuss that with you too. Great questions. Other questions? Comments? Yes?
Saying, I know itself be true, and that's why I asked for something. I asked for that feedback. I have developed something that has worked for me. It may not work for anyone else in the room, but I have certain people who I trust so implicitly. I can go to them and say, "Am I off my rocker if I want to do this?" Or how am I doing? Because I direct barbershop choruses, and one of them is a ladies' chorus. So I've got 2 or 3 that I say, okay, what's going on? Because they hear and see things that I don't. I have to be receptive to that. So you have to leave yourself a little vulnerable, but you can't do it with everybody. And the higher up in the ladder that you go, like pastors, they can't be going to any congregant and saying, hey, I'll necessarily confide in them. But so the higher up in the ladder that you go.
Yeah. And for them, it's nice to have a neutral third party to be able to have those discussions. All right. Stand up if you see the bright side in everything. Even on a bad day, something good is happening. And you're always cheering people up. You've already stood up. All right. Well, wonderful. I appreciate that. You think so too? All right, perfect. Have a seat. You're going to be great partners for me because I've been told that positivity out of 34 strengths is number 40 for me. Yeah. I know the math doesn't quite work out, but I will say as a kid I was picked on all the time. But this is my resting face. Do I look mad? I don't walk around. This is uncomfortable. I can't walk around smiling. So I often got ridiculed for not being a happy person. I really don't. Positivity is actually more in the middle for me, but that's what people told me as a kid, and it clearly has stuck with me. But I also know that you are all going to be great partners for me to help me say, you know what, Tiffany, it's going to be okay. Better things are on the horizon. It may not be tomorrow, but down the road. So again, you're going to be good partners for me. Stand up if you usually plan out your day as detailed as possible and are upset if it doesn't go as planned. And you typically have a similar morning and evening routine, and again, you want to keep it. Anybody? Thank you. I thought I was going to be by myself. Oh, you're taking a picture there. So discipline's very important for the two of you. I love it. So again, I talked about it before. Discipline could butt heads with adaptability because you're like looking at them, you're like, you're not getting anything accomplished. You just kind of go with the flow. But when we have that bad day or it's 10 o'clock in the morning and it feels like a bad day, adaptability can talk us off that ledge to say it's going to be okay. It's just a small hiccup, right?
It's almost like a to-do list. That I read this great book that I highly recommend. It's called The One Thing. And have anybody heard of it? And basically the premise of the book is, what one thing can I do today? In doing such would make everything else easier or unnecessary. So start off with a list and I plan out your day. Yeah, I do, and then I realize, okay, I circle one that if I don't do anything else today, I get that done. If the rest of it gets done, fine, then not tomorrow.
I'm going to skip through a couple just for time. Please don't be offended if I'm skipping a strength you might have. All right. So again, I want to talk to you a little bit again about application, right? I can say a lot of great things, but if you still don't necessarily know how it could help you, well, then what's the benefit? So this is a actual team that we worked with. When you look at this team, again, our strengths are color-coded, so again, we all learn differently. So does anything jump out at you here as you're looking at this team? And just shout it out. Diversity. Everything. It could be. I don't know. But
Got a lot of different strengths in there too.
are any strengths colors lacking? Green. Anything else? Yellow. So they're low in traction and low in problem identification. And then I do want to point out this one person here, all 5 driving strengths, very task focused. So when we work with teams, again, we want to say, what is this information telling us? So again, getting back to the question of the 4 categories versus what we teach. So a couple things. First, we want to see what the frequency of each strength is. And within this team, there were 5 strengths that 5 individuals had all of them. So we want to make sure that this percentage number isn't too high. So if it's too high, that means that the team is probably too homogeneous and there's not enough diversity there. And then we also say, what are we seeing with the culture of this team? And then with the team, we'd ask them, does this sound like you? And they're like, wow, yeah, like that's crazy. You'd think that you asked us about this, right? So that's what the strengths are telling us. And then it also, if we see what strengths aren't in there, what categories aren't in there, it's, again, an idea of this is probably where you might be struggling as a team. So with this team, we also say what strengths are missing. So we highlight them. So you see there's a handful of strengths that are missing within the team. And again, you'll notice with traction, they only have activator. And with problem identification, they only have strategic. So again, more data is kind of all pointing towards the same thing. So then again, I'm not going to get into all the specifics. If you want to talk more analytics, I'm happy to do that. But what we teach that with an index for a well-balanced team, that we want to see an index of 90 or better. So this is basically a simple gap analysis to say, do you feel like this might be where your team is struggling? And with this team, this is exactly what we were seeing. They were struggling to start new initiatives at 32 instead of 90. And then they were very low in problem identification. The other 2 were pretty close. Okay, so driving was close to 90 and problem solving was close to 90. And then, right before this happened, we found out that the individual who had all those driving strengths took a call somewhere else. So the driving went from 85 way down as well. So we were saying, okay, now we're kind of seeing what's likely happening. And again, we'll say what we see on paper, but then ask the team, do you see this happening for yourself? And this is where those 8 categories usually comes into play to say, yeah, what you're describing is what we're seeing and feeling on a daily basis. So then we'll say to them, okay, since that's happening, what can we do, right? We can't always hire people. So I'll move to the next if you were going to take a picture of that. So really the case study here is we had one individual that was leaving, and then we were already low in problem identification. And they kept saying, we're so busy, right? They were so reluctant to work with us because they're like, we just don't have time. We have so much other stuff to do. But to say, well, let's prioritize that to say, let's get to the problem identification. What is the real issue? And then let's gain some traction there. And so this group actually, again, they were low in those categories. So we said, what can we do? Let's add some team members. Are there other people that can volunteer and be a part of this team, right? And then we served as a resource for them. We were a partner-up opportunity for them where we were that accountability partner. We helped them with traction because we gave them resources, right? We handed over some resources, we trained them how to use them, and then they were able to do those on their own, right? Taught them to fish. And then we helped them with a strategic planning process so they weren't all, dealing with everything else, kind of the phrase of herding kittens, right? And then we help them streamline the meeting structure, because I often hear, well, in any organization, right, those meetings are just endless. Like the meeting could have been an email, right? Or we talked for 2 hours and I don't think we accomplished anything. Well, we help them prioritize that so those meetings were effective. They were able to maximize energy and output. Again, to have those conversations to say who should be doing what based on strengths. So clarifying those roles and responsibilities and having critical conversations. And I'll pause there. Does that make sense of how that could work for any organization, or see how that's applicable? Very good. So, all right, we only got a couple minutes, so I'm going to skip the next one, but our encouragement really is, my first thing would be, if you've never taken the assessment, I'd encourage you to do it. It's a $25 investment in yourself, and then to say, how can I use this for myself and my organizations? And then post your strengths on your desk, on your door, on your email signature. Encourage your team to have a team grid like I showed you before, where you have everybody's strengths, and now you can say, this is how I use my strengths since we last met, or catch somebody doing something good, right? When everybody catches you, you always feel like they caught you doing something wrong. Let's catch them using their strengths. Way to use your ranger strength with your piles on your desk, right? Way to meet 100 new people and add them to the newsletter list, right? And again, when that happens, you're like, oh, you saw that? Like, you appreciate me. Thank you. You know, people knowing that they value you. So by doing all of that, again, the idea is it's just today's one step. I hope that this is giving you ways of saying, let's make this an ongoing step, because it doesn't happen overnight. So I'm hoping that you think about things like this is a common, positive, objective way to have conversations with people, especially if those are individuals you might disagree with. Review your roles and responsibilities and try to say, how can I do more of what I love for maximum energy? And when you're thinking about your organizations, when it comes to volunteer opportunities, try to talk to them based on their strengths. Again, we were sort of talking about this before, but it's the idea of, okay, if you know somebody has traction, and even if they've never taken this assessment, when you're around people for a while, you can kind of guess what their strengths might be. Like you said, I have responsibility. I don't know how you figured that out, but so with traction, what is the first thing that you would do if you have traction, right? What's the first thing you would do? Because I don't really know what to do. I feel overwhelmed. Or if you know somebody has interpersonal strengths, who doesn't? All right. Who do you think doesn't really feel like they belong, right? So that could be maybe includer, to say I have to bring them in. You might have includer if you saw somebody sitting by themselves at all the last 2 days and you just wanted to go sit and talk to them and you don't want them to feel like they couldn't connect with anybody. If somebody is driving, what tasks are left? What do we have to finish? What's left to do? If they have problem identification, why does the same problem keep happening? And they're like, well, this is clearly obvious, right? There's a gas leak, or whatever it might be. If somebody has seeing strength, what is your vision for the future of our ministry, right? Get curious. Plant those seeds. So my hope is that you identify your and your team's superpowers and encourage them to leverage them further and help build that confidence in them. I just worked with somebody who got promoted into a different role, and she's like, I never would have applied for that role, but working in my first role, people saw that in me, and it just gave me the confidence to say, wow, I get to do this, and I'm excited, and guess what? I'm actually good at it. But I never would have known if somebody didn't see that in me. So I hope you identify and leverage your superpowers to intentionalize your energy management. And I won't say it again, but that's what I want you to do. The last thing I just want to point out, too, for everybody is if you are a church and you focus on outreach with either a school and or an early child care center, and you focus, if you're located in an urban setting, a little bit more information there, please talk to me. You may qualify for a grant. So I just want to let you know that may be a benefit for you as well to work with us. So with that, I'll let you take that picture. And then with that, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. I appreciate all your questions, your engagement, and I hope that you consider me a resource if I can ever answer anything for you. So I'm happy to stay here and talk to everybody, despite my relator, if you have any questions. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your event.